Hi everybody, Colin Stevenson here, joined by my sensei, John Lenhart. Hi John.
Hi.
Today we're talking about Giver How, Intangible Driver. And I introduced it in the last video on Monday there about the difference between a server and a giver, John, because we serve people on different levels, but when we give, it's just giving, and people can, once they understand the intangible drivers, they can actually pick up the difference, can't they?
Yeah, but this one is tricky. So this is a really tricky topic because, so if we remember with these intangible drivers, you have a why and a how. The
Yep.
why is the effect you want to have on other people. The how is what you actually do. So we covered, server and giver why. And what we said was that a server is going to respond to a need.
Yep.
A giver is going to try to make something better. So if someone, and we'll see this in a minute, but server, giver, giver, server, they can walk up to everybody because everybody either has a need or everybody's doing fine and you can improve them.
Yep.
So server and giver are kind of both halves. The issue is when it comes to the how, they look completely different. So we talked about a server how, they are going to move to wherever you are and they're going to match you. They're going to be a chameleon. Mm-hmm. So if you're a perceiver how, they'll become a perceiver how. I'm a teacher how, they'll become a teacher how. You're a server how, Colin, you move to teacher when we talk.
Yeah.
So you can think of server how as being it's chameleon, it's showing a wide range of emotions.
Yeah.
Giver how shows no emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Giver how is completely in the present and they just give, they're done, and they are not emotional. These are some of the most unemotional people you will see. When you look at them, they're not mean, they're not upset, they're not happy. They just look like nothing. They're completely unemotional people.
And they just give. So when you were talking about giving to make it better, right, to make the situation better. So when I serve people into the way that they need to be served to make their life better. A giver with no emotion. So you see parents, right? And again, I'm not slagging these people off or putting them down. Some parents are very loving, and usually the ones with no money, right, we can give our kids love. And then you get the rich parents who, not all of them, but you get the rich parents who go, oh, my kid's unhappy, right, there's $100. Go to the shop, buy yourself something nice, that'll produce some good dopamine there. And it's not because they're incapable of love or they don't love, it's because it's just the way that they show it, and that's where you're talking about the giver how being making it better by giving, isn't it?
Right, so the giver how is really trying to get you, you're doing okay, they're trying to get you better. So a server, the person's in a hole, they have a need, and when you say make them better from bad to good. A giver is trying to make you from good to great. So we talked about this before, and I've been actually talking with a lot of people since then because they saw the video, is that, remember, the issue with the giver is they are trying to make something better, great.
Yeah.
And so you're doing fine. You're doing okay. They walk up and they tell you how to make it better. And what happens is if you're insecure, if your first words are negative, the giver feels like you threw their gift on the floor. Yeah. And now they're going to become your worst enemy. So when we're talking about givers, we're talking about people who are looking at something that's fine and making it better. And there's two ways to do it. They can give a tangible gift, that's the $100, or they can give words, which are intangible, ideas, things like that. So I like what you just did there. There's two ways to give. Loving is giving intangibly, in a sense, with words and hugs and all stuff, versus here's $100. There's two ways to do this. So that's the way to remember is a giver doesn't always give something tangibly. Yeah. It's just quicker. And when people give tangibly, they definitely come off as unemotional. I like to think of in Gilligan's Island, Thurston Howell III. He was a giver. He just was no emotion, and he'd walk around and just, boom, you need this, you need that, and he was gone. You don't see him hanging around and having a conversation and building a relationship. He gives and he's gone. That's the way to think about these giver hows, is they give and they're gone.
Yeah. Now, I have got a compassion friend. Well, I've got a few compassion friends who talk about their parents when it comes to birthdays, when it comes to Christmas, when it comes to all I want is a hug from my father or my mother or my aunt or my uncle. And all these people do is give me presents. I don't want their presents. I want their love. But when I speak to them and explain if they are a giver how, what they're actually doing is showing to the best of their ability to try and make their life better. They're not looking, if they've not got compassion or they've not got the server first, you know, they are putting things onto them that they believe that it's right. So what is their unique way of showing it?
Right. And I know someone who took this course, and a relatives come and stay with them. A relative comes and stays with them every summer for a number of weeks, and it's just a bad experience. And when they realized the person coming was a giver, and then did what you just said, recognized this is how they're trying to show their love, they actually built a relationship this past summer. So I want to go through these intangible drivers, you know, to show this. So giver how they give and they're gone.
Yeah.
So perceiver giver is the ultimate example of give and gone. Santa Claus.
Yeah.
So perceiver, his why is perceiver. He wants you to know if you've been naughty or nice. He wants you to be aware you're naughty or nice. And how does he do it? He gives you coal or he gives you presents.
Yeah.
So that's a great example of like Santa gives and he's gone. That's a giver how. Teacher giver, we already talked about this with the teacher why. These are the advertising executives. You know, this is how advertising is done is, hey, we're trying to give you this great thing. Why? And that's kind of buried. There's the reason why we're doing it is because we see you have this problem. You know, if you talk to anybody advertising and sales, I want to know what your customer needs. What's their problem?
Yeah.
Then what are we going to give them or sell them to solve it? Teacher giver.
Yep. And sorry, just to interrupt there, when you were talking about obviously the teacher giver, we're going to go on to compassion, right? But if I was a compassion, because my server can change to giver, I need to feel what somebody needs before I give them it, rather than teach them a lesson.
Right. So compassion giver, and again, we can say this is a really sweet, you know, we've talked about being a really sweet grandma. You feel it and then you just give and they're sweet. But remember, compassion can also be riled up. Compassion can be energized. And so one of my favorite characters, like when I meet a compassion giver, I love to tell them, you know who's a compassion giver? Jason Bourne. And then I'll say to them, compassion givers are assassins. And no joke, try this next time you talk to a compassion giver. They'll go like this. They'll go. And it's like, well, we're going to talk about these micro expressions at a later time. But it's like they know it. Compassion givers know they are like strategic and they're an assassin. And Jason Bourne, that the reason he doesn't shoot the guy is because there's kids there. His compassion kicked in. Even though he doesn't know who he is comes out. And then at the end, he's like, do you see what they make us give? You know, what they do is give. What Jason Bourne does is give. You know, that's what he's always doing is giving. Yeah. But where he comes from is out of compassion. Yeah. And that's what's driving that character. Even though he doesn't know who he is, your uniqueness is always going to continue to shine through.
Yep. And this is what people don't understand. Their intangible driver or their uniqueness doesn't matter what's going on round about you, or if you even don't know yourself. We hear people talking about being lost or having to find themselves when all they really need to know is their intangible drivers.
Right. So giver is just a pure philanthropist. They're giving to give. And that's how we know most people that way. Server giver is an inventor. You know, they look, whatever need you have, they're going to come up with a way to make it better. So that's where a lot of these server givers, you're not going to know why they're giving to you, but it's because they saw this need. And again, we saw server wise are really, really smart. They see all the way around the problem and they're real quick for us. Administrator givers are these startup investors. When someone becomes an angel investor, You know, they are trying to administrate you. They're trying to coordinate a group of people. They're trying to get everybody forward. And the way they do it is they give.
Yeah.
And then finally, exhorter, giver. Parks and Rec, Leslie Knope. So it's funny, we talked about exhorter compassion was Michael Scott from The Office. One of the characters in The Office, Mose, became the producer of Parks and Rec. And when they started Parks and Rec, they tried to make Leslie Knope, the main character, more like Michael Scott. And then after the first season, a lot of the characters and everything changed and they found their own stride. And Leslie Knope became this exhorter giver. She's always excited, which is that exhorter. She wants everybody to be excited. But the way she does stuff is give. And she's got a different day, holiday for everybody to give, because they say she always gives. And that's the main thing you see about Leslie, is she always gives. And then she's gone. She gives and she's gone. The exhorter is what you see. Now, again, I don't know whether this made it over to the UK, but in America, my kids, who are all in their 20s, grew up with the character Barney the dinosaur.
Yes. We've got Barney.
Dinosaur?
Yeah.
Barney was exhorter giver too.
Right, okay.
So when you watch that, you know, I love you, you love me, which is the giving, and we're a happy family. Hey, we're all exhorted. Yeah. This is great. Hey, boys and girls. I used to do an impersonation of Barney for my kids, you know, when they were younger. And it was like, yeah, it was being exhorter giver, is that mentality. So a lot of adults or 20-year-olds in the United States grew up, you know, with their favorite buddy being this exhorter giver.
And because Barney was always giving love, giving songs, giving hugs, everyone was naturally drawn towards Barney. And that's why he was such a good children's character to be on. And it taught them, even if it wasn't their intangible drivers, it still teaches them the habit of giving. And this is why I believe when people understand people better, they might not resonate with their intangible driver, but it can get them into the habits of doing so themselves.
Right. And we can all give because it's love.
Yep.
And love causes your unconscious brain to release chemicals, and that's where you feel joy. So givers naturally love, but really love is, I call it a contextless principle. Everybody in the world, regardless of uniqueness, can love and get energy from loving.
Of course, absolutely. Now, as we all know, giver is an awesome person. I love givers because 9.999 times out of 10, they're not expecting anything in return, which shows how selfless they are. And I spoke to you before about my grandmother, and she is like that. She doesn't want anything. She doesn't want a thank you. She just wants to make it better. So no, I'm totally with you on today's subject. And it is very difficult to watch between a giver and a servant and try and work it out. But hopefully today now, people now know the difference. So thank you so much, John.
Right. The big difference is between server and giver is if you respond to a server negatively, they're going to be okay with it.
Yeah.
If you respond to a giver negatively, they're going to become your worst enemy. And it's like we talked about it. You know, I've found when I go into the prisons, there's a lot of compassion guys there and there's a lot of givers there. And it's because people were so insecure, they didn't know how to accept a gift from these very nice people.
Yep.
And so then these people got upset and lashed out, and then they ended up in prison. But they're lovers, they're nice people.
Yeah, and this is the thing, and it's tarnished through society, name calling and brackets, you know, and pigeonholing people, when every single person has their own intangible driver. And if they were known and they were treated the way that they want to be treated, or spoken to the way they wanted to be spoken to, they wouldn't have committed the crime. So sometimes it's not always their fault. It is a choice, but sometimes they can be driven. So as it says, it's very good to be able to obviously look into them differently, and it's very good to understand what a giver is, because I love givers and I don't get offended. Being compassion, I can feel that it's coming from a good place, so I don't need to worry about they're not giving me hugs and kisses with that. This is the best that they can do. But there's a lot of people that are not compassionate, and this is where they don't understand, and they can sometimes take offense to that as well.
Exactly.
Excellent. Thank you so much, John. I look forward to speaking to you on Monday. Take care.